Why South Sudan? An Every Village podcast where we answer questions about the world's youngest nation. The question of the day is, what does a typical day in South Sudan look like? Hello, everyone. My name is Tianna Johnston, and I am the host of this podcast called Why South Sudan? I have Andrew Brown, Executive Director of Every Village, here with me.
What's up, Tianna?
Welcome back. So today, I thought we maybe changed up a little bit. And this one, I thought it would be really fun if maybe you could share what a typical day looks like for a man. And then maybe I could share what it looks like for a woman. I do want to kind of preface this really with just sharing that this is just a generalization. Not everyone lives this way. But just from our time being there and knowing the South Sudanese, I think this is like a good summary of what we would, a conclusion of what we would come up with.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's right because obviously there are exceptions to every rule and there's differences. That said, South Sudan has less diversity than the average culture. They're just a very homogenous culture. There are 64 tribes, so there's differences between those tribes, but it's not like there's a lot of outside influence compared to the average country. Mm-hmm. And then also there's just not a lot of variety even in terms of socioeconomic scale, which is very unique to nations. Most nations there's kind of a wealthy class and a poor class, and then there's middle class somewhere in between. In South Sudan, from top to bottom, there's definitely a small segment of politicians that maybe are on a different scale, but for the average South Sudanese in South Sudan, and that's the vast majority, they're just all the same. It's still 90% of the population lives in mud huts, and so we have to remember that as well. That there's kind of a brotherhood across South Sudan because there's a shared experience, which is kind of unique. So, what does a day look like for the average man? I'll say this is there's a lot of walking, and that's going to be the same for a woman as well. But South Sudan has only 200 miles of paved road, and it's the size of Texas. So again, very undeveloped. Because of that, there's very few vehicles, and almost no person has access to a vehicle. Maybe some motorcycles, but even that, not tons. If they're fortunate, maybe they have a bicycle, but not tons. And so every South Sudanese is used to walking miles every day. Not just used to it, that's what they do. So it's just an interesting thing. And, as they wake up to get started with the day, well, South Sudan changed their time zone a couple years ago. And so now the sun comes up about 5:15, 5:30 in the morning every day, all year long. So there's an early start to the day. And the people, depending on what their schedule is or what they're going to be doing that day, they'll get up and start walking. So because it'll take an hour or two to walk, depending on where they're headed. And so that's the kind of the baseline. Every South Sudanese is in good shape, physical shape. And so anyway, but from it depends on seasons of life and age of a man. But I'll start with the boys. For the largest tribes in South Sudan are all cattle-keeping tribes. They love their cows. And so at different times of year, especially during the dry season, they set up cattle camps that are far away from home, that are near a water source, near a river or whatever, or a marsh. And so they'll stay for 2 or 3 months, they'll stay in these cattle camps with the cattle so they have access to water during the dry period. And that is like the dream life for a boy, to be in the cattle camp. And so what does a day look like? Well, they'll be out there with their cattle, hundreds, if not even sometimes thousands of head of cows that are there that they have to tend to. What's interesting about the cows is they're almost like they're domesticated animals because they tie the cows up. Each cow has a rope leash tied to a stick in the ground, and they'll wake up in the morning and they'll untie the cows and let them go to pasture, if you will, to the water source to drink and roam. And they'll follow them around, or they'll lead them to where they want to go, these boys. But then in the evenings, the cows come back to the camp, and they all know where their stick is, and they're trained. And the cow will go back to the same stick, and the boys know, they have a head count. They know each one of their cows by name. they identify if they're missing. It's really a fascinating thing that we don't think about here, but the boys love that, and they oftentimes when the cattle camp, what the activity is the boys. They love just spending time with the cows. They'll oftentimes cover themselves with they'll burn the dung of the cattle and the ash from that. They'll cover their bodies with. It keeps away bugs, and it's also a cleaning agent. There's a lot of factors, but you'll see really dusty boys in the cattle camp. They love wrestling, so wrestling's a big activity in cattle camp for boys, and then they'll if they're hungry, they'll just drink the milk from the cow. Sometimes they'll milk cows into a gourd. Sometimes they'll drink directly from the cow. A lot of different things, and young boys will grow up with fond memories of the cattle camp where they would spend 2 months not eating any food, just living on the milk of the cows. And so anyway, that's kind of early stage life and what a life can look like. But back as they grow to be adults, the South Sudanese are very social people. And so for the average man, he'll get up and he loves then maybe walking into the market and visiting with friends, and he'll meet at a tea shop and we'll sit and drink tea and laugh and joke. And that's one of the things that Tianna, you and I both know. When you walk around South Sudan and you see groups of men sitting together just kind of laughing, telling stories, and they love doing that. And there's no concept of time really in South Sudan. They don't, in fact, in most of the local languages, they don't have a word for time. So if they want to talk about time, to be very specific, they have to switch to Arabic. If when it's 4 o'clock, well, they have to say that in Arabic. Otherwise, traditionally, they'll just say when the sun is here, and they point to the sky. And that's so. If that's your definition for time, then of course it's going to be pretty fluid of what time things start and end. And so the men will sit around and enjoy each other's company, take some tea, and then they really enjoy games, particularly dominoes. And I've never sat down and played with them to know the rules, kind of like maybe Mexican Train or something like that. I don't really know. But what I love is, there's these dusty domino tiles that they have in a lot of little remote villages, and the men get so into it. And you've seen it before when they don't ever do anything passively. It's always aggressive. So when they have a domino piece to play, they'll take it way up high in the air and slap it down as hard as they can. Mm-hmm. and so it's just kind of, and even watching them play games is a fascinating thing. And so they'll do that for a lot of the day. And then, in the evening time, they'll go back home and they'll have dinner at home. So that's kind of the average day in life. Obviously, at different seasons, during cultivating season, the men will go out in the fields and they'll be tilling the soil. They'll be planting seeds for their crops. The normal crops in South Sudan, all South Sudanese families pretty much grow sorghum. Sorghum is the main staple food. But then they'll also grow peanuts and maybe some okra. It depends on places in South Sudan, but that's kind of the average crop. And so that's a lot of hard work for a few weeks there, or a month of cultivation, and then they wait for the rains. And then when harvest time comes, then they'll do that. So you've got those seasonal activities, but at the end of the day, they're just kind of a social, fun-loving group of people. And then of course the South Sudanese that have the privilege of having a job, that's quite a bit different. But even still, we were talking about, even in the capital city of Juba, which is growing into a pretty large city with a lot of activity, you still see that traditional mindset of social activity. You'll see men in suits that have some type of job, and they're still sitting outside around in a circle, drinking tea and laughing together in the middle of the day. and so, it's kind of like, you can take the man out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the man, right? And so that's kind of what a typical day looks like for a South Sudanese man.
I love that. I love that. Even as you were talking, I was just visualizing it, and it just brings me back to South Sudan. It really does. So well done. Yeah, I would actually say that a woman's life looks very similar, especially I think depending on the season, depending on kind of what is going on. But even thinking through just how much children are a blessing for moms because they need help at home. So for a woman, you're going to wake up when the sun rises. That's something beautiful in South Sudan that I genuinely miss. It's really is like the whole earth kind of wakes up. Like the birds are chirping, the sun is coming. You see people walking down the road. They'll be singing, a cultural song, and it's such a beautiful, crisp sound of worship. And so for a woman, so they're waking up, their kids are all in the hut with them, because also traditionally in South Sudan, that the man has his own hut. So the man is separated from the women and children. So the mom's waking up with the kids. They're going out of the hut, waking up slowly, but they will always. So let's say the mom's gonna then put certain children in charge of certain things. So like the oldest daughter is gonna help with the fire. They're gonna make sure if there's any food left over from the night before that they can reheat so everyone can eat. Or yes, and then we have let's say the second daughter after that's going to be sweeping the ground, because you want to make sure that the compound doesn't attract any snakes. So you always are sweeping the ground. And then for the boys, I mean, you're going to either, if you have the funds, you would send them off to school, at least the eldest one that you have. And then for one of the other girls, you're going to send them to the market to go get something if there's something that you're planning for dinner, or if there's like a seasoning you need to get, you're going to send one of your kids off to do that. And then for a woman, also, you need to go fetch water. You need water for the whole day, not just to eat or to drink, but also to bathe with. So you're going to either go yourself, or you're going to send your daughter to go fetch water. And so even for clothing, it depends on where they're going. So if they're going into the market as a woman, you're going to intentionally pick maybe one of your nicer dresses. You might only have maybe one or two. You don't have very many. I know, especially if you go to church, you always want to have your one nice outfit for church. So you might wear that one to the market, just in case you see friends and you say hi to them. But you always they bathe before they go. So that means really just splashing water on their feet to get the dust off of them, and wiping off their hands and cleaning their face. Because the South Sudanese, I mean, they're just like us. They care about what they look like. They want to be put together. They don't want to look like an outcast or look anything out of the normal. So they always want to have their hair braided. A lot of women, they would love to have weave in their hair, or to wear wigs even. Earrings, just to feel beautiful. And I know a lot of women here in America would relate to that, just because we do care about our appearance, and so do the South Sudanese. And so for the woman, so you're going to really disperse your children out to help, which is a blessing, especially as a mom. You know how much work there is to do, as well as disciplining your kids, because kids are kids. They're going to fight. They're going to fight over little toys that are made out of mud, or trash that they've turned into toys. And then throughout the day, as let's say the sun is setting and your husband's then coming home, so you hopefully will have one meal for the day. Because honestly, that is a reality for a lot of South Sudanese, is that you get one meal for the day. And so you'll eat it kind of later in the day. And then again, if there's anything left over in the morning that you can eat, then you eat all together. Sometimes if you have enough money, you're able to go into town and maybe get bread. And so you can kind of eat that throughout the day. But, or if you're harvest, you have peanuts. I know that I've went to friends' houses actually during mango season, and, just got 4 mangoes that I got to eat at one setting, which is such a blessing from the Lord. Something that I really came to appreciate too, living there, was, seeing a tomato that you cut it open, and there's so many seeds in there for us, his children, to then plant for us to have more harvest and to have more tomatoes and more food. So that's something that you really see in South Sudan. So you see the G-nuts, which are peanuts. You see the sorghum. You see the sugar cane that you're sucking on and just gets you all jittery because it's all the sugar. And so then let's go back to, the sun's going down, and now it's time to go to bed. And so you're going to go into the hut with your kids just the way that you woke up, and you're all going to go to sleep when the sun goes down, and start it all over the next day.
Yeah, when going back to the cooking, obviously they don't have microwaves.
Yes.
What does that look like? I mean, you've been camping, I know.
Hmm.
When we go camping, we typically try to bring either prepackaged foods to keep it simple, or but if you do cook a meal when you're camping, we
Yeah.
all know for campers that it still takes a while. You got to make a fire. You don't rush that meal and prep.
Hmm.
But in South Sudan, that's every day. What does that look like?
Yeah, so they do charcoal, which charcoal isn't what we think it is. Charcoal is actually they burn trees. There's like oak trees specifically. There's a specific kind of tree that they like to do, but they basically burn it down to turn it into charcoal. And so these kids are taught at such a young age, but they're literally burning this charcoal so hot in that it even like the gray ash is the hottest part, but you wouldn't know. You're thinking that this fire's put out, but that's actually the hottest part. So sadly, a lot of children actually get burned because they'll be, crawling on the ground and everything, and they will hit the ash and then it will burn them. Also, tea is a huge thing for the South Sudanese. They love tea so much. So
Wait, do they like tea, or do they like the sugar with their tea?
I know, I guess we call it sugar tea. Because it is. It's probably like, what, a fourth of a cup of sugar
Yeah.
with a very, like maybe half of a cup of tea.
And then when you go from home to home and you have multiple cups, you
Yes.
start getting some sugar headaches.
It is quite delicious. So they do have tea. So yeah, I mean, when you're cooking, when you're having to, even boil water, like it takes so much more time. Even here in America now we have the electric kettles, which are quite nice. There you can't. Everything takes time. So walking to the market takes time. Going to fetch water takes time. There's so much. Yeah, it's not a very efficient way of living, but it is like a beautiful way of living in simplicity. And also like the social aspect. So going to the market, going to the water well, just walking down the road or visiting a neighbor that just had a baby. Like there's just such a beautiful communal living that you're happy to see people. You're happy to engage in whoever God brings along the footpath.
And I love that. You talk about time, and even as you were talking, I just pictured the double-edged sword of that, in a sense. The challenge of time in South Sudan and the beauty of time in South Sudan. The challenge being that all these things take so much time, and so it robs them of opportunity of other things that they can do. Particularly education is a huge issue. But we talk about the time it takes to go to a water well to get water for their family every day. That takes away from time with your family, with your kids. There's safety issues. There's just all those things. So the demanding side of time robs people of opportunity. That's on the hard side. But then on the beautiful side, because they're a culture that says when the sun is here, they're not in a hurry. They're not in a rush. And so they linger. They focus on relationship. They don't focus on going to the next task or, and that's a beautiful side of time. They understand a richness of time that we never understand in the West because we're so rushed from thing to thing to thing. And so that's kind of the both ends of the spectrum of time, and I think it's a fascinating thing to consider.
Yeah, I'd agree to that for sure. Because even, I mean, here, like if you got to bring your child to the doctor, you got to go to work, you got to do like all these things are going to get done. But living in South Sudan, that like if you're bringing your child to the government hospital, it's going to take a very long time. That you're going to walk all the way there. You're going to have to then wait in line with masses of other people to then see the doctor, get medicine, and then have to walk all the way home. Hopefully not in the dark, because the sun goes down and then it's pitch black out. So there. Yeah, I agree. There's such a beauty in the hardship, but yeah, because I know when I lived there, man, I wasn't rushed. It was just, you could be so in the present. You could just really, I think, just see the Lord's goodness and just how he created. I just feel like that was such a picture of Eden. That it was just such a simple way of living and just a natural place of worship.
Yeah, that's so good. Just go back as well to, you talk about at the end of the day, the mom goes into her hut with her kids sleeping. What does the sleeping arrangement look like typically?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So a lot of it does depend on the finances of the family, but if they are, let's say, the wealthier, then they will actually have a bed. So a bed means just a wood frame, and then maybe tied with like goat skin. And then on top of it, again, if they have finances, then they're able to get like a mattress, which the mattress isn't great. It's like a little foam mattress, but it's something. And then let's say if the family doesn't, they will still have a hut, but then you will have a mat that is like woven together. I think it's like grass or like a tree, like tree branches, I guess. but it's actually like woven together and that you sleep on that. So because again, you don't want to sleep straight on the ground because there's scorpions. Scorpions are a very real thing in South Sudan, and a lot of people get stung, even if you like roll over on your back because they like to be in hidden places. So that, and then for, I mean, those are like the main two for sure. And then I guess let me add too, this is kind of fun. So depending on if it's a hot season or cold season, the cold season, I mean, it's so cold, so then they'll like light a fire inside the hut.
So cold for them, right? I mean, we're still not
like
talking
70.
about super, yeah. I mean, 70, but without any protection from it, it does feel cold. It's
For
almost
sure.
not
And without the
desert,
sun.
but it's kind of almost an arid environment. So, but
For
anyway,
sure.
I just wanted to say it's not so cold.
For sure. Yeah, I remember always like when I was so cold, I would just hover around the the fire and
Yeah.
just like freezing.
Yeah.
Again, it's like 70 degrees.
Yeah.
And then for the like the really hot nights, because it'll be really hot, especially when the rains are coming. So then it gets so humid. And a lot of people will actually sleep outside their hut. So they'll like drag out their mat. And of course, you know, everybody has, I never even thought of this until living there too. But I was talking to one of my friends and they said everybody has to sleep fully clothed because if fighting comes, you have to be able to get up and leave immediately. And I'm like, that doesn't even register for me, you know? Um, yeah, it's just so interesting. It's just a different way of life.
Yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
It's fun to talk about for sure.
I know, it's so fun. I like that. Thanks for chiming in with some questions to kind of elaborate on some other things.
Oh yeah,
It's so real in my brain. It's like how to like put it out.
I know. Well, you know, you and we've lived there. We've spent so much time, and that's why, you know, for our listeners, it's hard to connect that world, but it's so important for us to try. And you know, it is truly ends of the earth stuff. It's, you know, and it's the, you know, some of the hardest things you'll ever see, and some of the most beautiful things you'll ever see.
Amen. Well, that was a perfect note to end on, actually. Thanks so much for sharing. Definitely made my day just going through all of that. I welcome you back to join us for the next episode where we will answer who are some partners that you work with in South Sudan. Take care.